Democracy then becomes like a managerial modernity. It looks like a kind of neutral instrumentality of some sort or another. What's interesting is that I think the socialisms, communisms, anarchisms, fascisms, all of which were part of the landscape of modernity, inventions of modernity, those too are managerial systems. What's interesting to me is they do not necessarily pretend to be neutral. In other words, if equality is your value, you shove it in there, into the body politic in some fashion or another. But with democracy, there seems to be a kind of neutral instrumentality sometimes that we think can be done if we intervene properly, correctly, and so on. All modernist political orders share a common goal: the release and management of potentiality. I think this is huge. What I want to say here is that if we think of nature, let's say we're thinking of nature in the 1600s, 1700s, if we think of nature as something to be used, as a resource, if we can just harness it, we can release it. What that amounts to finally is the mastery of nature. At the same time, we're thinking about the human. And so freedoms, rights, liberties, equality, what I call the democratic rhetorics, are part of that mastery of the human potential as well, releasing human potential through those modes. If we think of the machine, potentiality of the machine, what drives the very notion of progress, release the potentiality of the machine. Machine has tenfold power, let's say, of the human. We have even more potentiality on behalf of the human. Economics, of course, private property, the distinction between public and private, which is something kind of working along with data bleeding right now, when that distinction begins to emerge. The legal fictions that I urged earlier, the notion of the free market, all of these are forms of releasing potentiality. And that's why neoliberal, ordoliberal, distributive forms of economic distribution, and so on. I do not get so much excited by the critiques of neoliberalism. To me, it's another form of managerial modernity, and most systems, most governments have a toolkit. Neoliberalism over here, Keynesianism over here, and they do the jiggering. They jigger one way, they jigger another way in order to produce something, in order to respond to something. Yes, they're fraught with all kinds of political beliefs and values, but it's all part of that managerial modernity landscape. A definition of techno-positivism, the idea that science and machines, technology can grasp the physical world as it is in order to solve all problems and maximize human flourishing. Again, the notion of potentiality. So ultimately, I think of this as growth, the management of growth across all of these domains: political, economic, technical, certainly addressed to things like nature. So if we think of it this way, if you're at least beginning to entertain this notion of managerial modernity, then obviously some problematics begin to appear in my argument. Our massive society is manageable. My first answer is probably not, at least not in the way that we hope it can be managed. Can we manage GDP growth as one realization of potentiality, for instance? If you follow a libertarian argument, no, you should not manage it, just let it rip. If you're more progressive, you want to manage growth because you want to distribute potentiality to everyone in that fashion. So these contrary ideas about management begin to create problems in the managerial system itself. Are the masses representative? And if they're not, then potentiality might not be realizable. And what I mean by representable, and for me, and this comes from my field work, all right, so let me kind of talk about it from there. we have the representative. Can the representative in a city like Chicago with a ward that has 60,000 people, 75,000 people, 80,000 people, however number it has, can that one representative represent 60,000 people? It's impossible. And so the few are representable, much easier to represent the few. And when those few do not feel that they're being represented, some other grouping kind of emerges to try to get represented. But I think this becomes the start of alienation in some sort of way. I don't feel represented. I just don't feel represented. And where I do work, what's interesting is I've been working 2 decades in Puerto Rican community around Humboldt Park, Chicago. We managed to get control of the representation. We control the 4th Congressional District through Chuy Garcia. We control the representatives of that area downstate in the Assembly. We control the Senate. We control the aldermanic offices locally. So control for us does not mean the oligarch or the lobbyist is controlling the representative. In this particular case, it's constituents who are fairly marginalized in and of themselves have managed to get control. But it's the same problem. We do not necessarily want, and here's one group that is contending with us, the gentrifiers, who are largely white, who are interested in development, who are interested in property values skyrocketing in the city so that they can get more profits. And the city is also interested in that because it wants taxes. And so we oppose that, and we kick them out, quite frankly, through all kinds of means. So that's the sort of battle, eventually, that democracy becomes. But other groups do not get represented as a result.